Picture this. You're sitting down at the end of your month, pulling up your bank account, and you're looking at the same number you've been staring at for the past year, maybe even longer. Nothing's changed. You've been working, you've been trying to manage your money better, you've been making sacrifices, and yet somehow it feels like you're trapped on a financial treadmill. The needle isn't moving. And here's the thing that drives me crazy about the situation. Most people think that to actually build real wealth, to actually change their financial situation, they need to make some massive dramatic shift. They think they need to find a way to double their income, or they need to inherit some money, or they need to get lucky somehow. But the truth, and this is what I want to talk about today, is that the real magic of building wealth has almost nothing to do with big moves at all. It's actually in the tiny, almost invisible changes that you make every single day. My name is Nick, and I think way too much about compound interest daily habits and why most people completely underestimate the power of 1% improvements in their financial life. If you actually want to understand how regular people without huge incomes build substantial wealth, and you want to know why some people seem to accelerate financially while others stay stuck, make sure you hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if it changes how you think about money. Here's the thing that most people don't realize. If you can get 1% better every day, you'll be 37 times better by the end of the year. 37 times better. That's not a typo, that's the math. And yet, almost nobody operates this way. We live in this culture where we're obsessed with overnight success, with finding the one big thing that's going to change everything. We see someone on social media who apparently built a massive business, and we think there was one moment, one decision, one piece of luck that made it all happen. But the reality is almost always completely different. Like, behind almost every financial success story is someone who made a series of tiny decisions day after day, month after month, year after year, that compounded over time into something remarkable. And the crazy part is that these tiny decisions are often so small that people dismiss them as irrelevant. You can't seriously think that saving an extra $5 today is going to change your life. You can't think that skipping one expensive coffee a week is going to make a difference. You can't think that reading for 15 minutes about investing is going to matter. But the truth is that when you understand how compounding actually works, when you really grasp the mathematics of it, these tiny actions suddenly don't look so small anymore. Let me explain what's actually happening mathematically when you make these small changes. Most of our brains think in straight lines. If you save $100 today, you think you have $100. If you save $100 again next month, you think you have $200. That's linear thinking. That's how most people conceptualize money. But that's not how money actually works when you invest it. When you invest money, it starts earning returns. And here's where most people's brains break. Those returns start earning their own returns, and those returns earn returns on their returns. It's exponential, not linear. It's the difference between a line and a hockey stick. For the first few years, you're basically looking at a straight line. You can barely see the growth. You're making all these sacrifices. You're staying disciplined, and the results feel almost invisible. But then something magical starts to happen. The curve bends upward, and suddenly the growth becomes undeniable. Let me give you a real example that will make this crystal clear. Sarah is 30 years old and makes $50,000 per year. Every morning, she stops at a convenience store and buys an energy drink and a breakfast sandwich. Total cost, $7.50. Now, most financial advice would tell Sarah to stop buying breakfast entirely and save that money, but that's not how atomic habits work. Instead, Sarah makes one tiny adjustment. She decides that on Mondays, she'll bring breakfast from home instead of buying it. Just Mondays, that's it. This saves her $7.50 per week, which equals about $400 per year. Now, $400 doesn't sound life-changing, right? But watch what happens when we apply the mathematics of compound growth. If Sarah invests that $400 annually and earns 8% returns, she'll have over $70,000 in 35 years. But Here's where it gets interesting. Because this habit was so easy to maintain, after a month, Sarah naturally started bringing breakfast on Tuesdays as well. Then Wednesdays, within 6 months, she was bringing breakfast from home 4 days per week. Now she's saving $30 per week, which equals about $1,500 annually. Invested at 8% for 35 years, this becomes over $250,000. The psychological problem with this, and this is really important to understand, is that for the first several years, you won't feel like it's working. You'll see almost no progress, and then your brain will tell you that this approach is pointless. This is called the plateau of latent potential. And it's probably the biggest reason why people give up right before they're about to break through. You're doing everything right, you're staying consistent, and nothing seems to be happening. It's like pushing a boulder up a hill in the dark where you can't even see if you're making progress. Most people quit at this exact moment. They think this isn't working, and they go back to their old habits. But here's what they don't realize. Behind the scenes, the system is working. Your habits are creating a foundation. Your money is beginning its exponential journey. You're not seeing results yet, but the results are coming. They're just delayed. The most powerful outcomes of any compounding process are delayed. That's the phrase that should haunt you in a good way, because understanding this is what separates people who build wealth from people who stay stuck. Now, here's something else that most people completely miss about atomic money habits. It's not just about the money itself. It's about the person you become in the process of building those habits. When you commit to saving $5 a day, you're not just accumulating money. You're literally rewiring your brain. You're developing the ability to delay gratification, which is honestly probably the most valuable financial skill anyone can learn. Think about it. Every day you choose not to spend that $5. You're making a decision that your future matters more than your immediate comfort. You're voting for a version of yourself that values long-term security over short-term pleasure. And when you do that day after day, week after week, you start to become that person. You start seeing yourself differently. You start making other financial decisions from that new identity. Maybe you were the kind of person who always bought the name brand when you were out shopping, and now you're the kind of person who compares prices because that's what financially aware people do. Maybe you were someone who ate out constantly, and now you're becoming someone who cooks at home most nights because you understand the power of small savings. This identity shift is where the real magic happens. You're not white knuckling through deprivation. You're becoming a different person. And when you're that person, all the financial habits that used to feel impossible suddenly feel normal. Here's something that will probably surprise you about how this actually works in practice. The biggest barrier to building atomic money habits isn't actually motivation or discipline, it's friction. I guess if saving money requires you to manually go through some complicated process every month, most people won't do it consistently. But if you automate it, if you set it up so the money automatically transfers from your paycheck to a savings or investment account before you even see it, suddenly the habit becomes effortless. This is why automation is so powerful. You're removing the decision-making component. You're removing the temptation. You're just making it so that the habit happens automatically. And when something happens automatically, you can maintain it forever. The person with no willpower can still build wealth if they automate their savings. The person with tremendous willpower might still fail if they have to manually execute their financial habits because eventually willpower runs out. Everyone runs out of willpower eventually. But systems never run out. A system that's been set up to run automatically will keep running whether you're motivated that day or not. Think about how powerful that is. You could be going through a terrible month where you're stressed about work, your relationships are struggling, you're dealing with health issues, and you don't have the emotional energy for anything. But your automated savings, it still happens. Your automatic investment contribution still goes through. You're building wealth while you're sleeping, while you're dealing with life's chaos, while you're completely distracted by everything else. This is why you should be far more concerned with your current trajectory than with your current results. Right now, wherever you are financially, whatever your bank account looks like, it doesn't really matter that much. What matters is the direction you're moving in. If you're earning $40,000 a year and saving $500 a month, you're on a path toward financial security. That's a great trajectory. If you're earning $150,000 a year and spending $160,000 a month, you're on a path toward financial ruin, regardless of how much you currently have. Your outcomes are a lagging measure of your habits. Your net worth right now is basically a report card on the financial habits you had 3, 5, or 10 years ago. But the financial position you'll be in 10 years from now, that's being determined by the habits you're building today. This is why understanding this concept is so important, because it means you have more control over your future than you think. You can't change your past financial decisions, but you can change your habits starting right now. And those changed habits will compound into a completely different financial future. Here's another thing that really matters when you're thinking about atomic money habits. Most people approach habits like they're on a diet. They go all in, they make huge changes, they completely overhaul their financial life, and then 6 weeks later, they're exhausted and they fall back into their old patterns. Bigger changes aren't better. In fact, smaller changes are almost always better because smaller changes are sustainable. The person who tries to save 40% of their income might be able to do it for a month, but they'll burn out. The person who commits to saving 5% of their income and then gradually increases it over time as their income grows or they optimize their spending can do it for decades. And decades of consistent 5% savings will absolutely destroy occasional 40% savings attempts. Consistency beats intensity every single time in the compounding game. This is why the best financial habits are the ones that feel almost impossibly easy. If your financial habit feels like a massive sacrifice, you're not going to maintain it. If it feels like you're barely making a change, that's actually a sign you found something sustainable. Start so small that it almost feels silly. Save $25 from each paycheck instead of $250. Spend 15 minutes learning about investing instead of completely overhauling your portfolio. Cut one subscription instead of eliminating all discretionary spending. These changes feel almost invisible, but they're the ones you'll actually maintain, and maintenance is everything. Now, let's talk about what actually happens over time when you commit to these tiny habits. Year one feels disappointing. You've been disciplined, sacrificed, and your net worth has barely budged. Maybe you've saved $20,000. Your peers living it up are still doing fine financially. You might be questioning if this whole approach is really worth it. Year two gets slightly more interesting. You've got $40,000 now, and that money is starting to earn meaningful returns. Year five is where something shifts. You have over $100,000, and because of compounding, your money is now generating thousands of dollars in free growth every single year. Your money is doing more work than you are. This is huge. Year 10 gets genuinely exciting. You might have $250,000 to $350,000 depending on your specifics. Your passive income is generating $15,000 to $20,000 per year without any effort from you. Year 20 is where things become truly transformative. You might have $800,000 to $1.2 million. Your investment income alone is generating $50,000 to $70,000 annually. You're starting to see a world where you can actually make choices based on what you want, rather than what you financially have to do. Year 30 is where everything becomes undeniable reality. You've built a multi-million-dollar portfolio. Your passive income is substantial and entirely generated from the small, consistent decisions you made decades earlier. The small amounts you started with have compounded into your entire retirement foundation. But here's the tricky part about this whole process. Most people don't actually make it through year 5. They get discouraged during years 2 and 3 when the results are still invisible, and they go back to their old habits. This is tragic because they're abandoning the approach right before it starts to work. The difference between someone who builds $1 million portfolio and someone who doesn't isn't usually their starting salary or the luck they had. It's whether they stayed committed through years 2 and 3 when the results were invisible. This is why understanding the mathematics is so important. When you know that the plateau of latent potential is a real thing, when you understand that compounding takes time to reveal itself, you can push through that discouraging period with confidence instead of doubt. You're not wondering if the approach works. You know it works mathematically. You're just waiting for the results to become visible. There's another aspect of atomic money habits that doesn't get talked about enough, and it's how these habits affect your overall decision making in ways that extend far beyond finances. When you're trained to make tiny financial decisions that compound over time, you start seeing your entire life differently. You're not just thinking about today. You're thinking about what today's decision means for your financial future and your long-term trajectory. That $300 purchase might seem reasonable and completely justified today, but if you understand compounding, you see it as $3,000 in lost wealth over 30 years. That's not to say you can never spend money on things you genuinely want and value, but you start being much more intentional about what you're spending on. You start asking whether things are really worth the opportunity cost, whether they genuinely improve your life, or whether they're just impulse purchases you're justifying, and most of the time you realize they're not worth it. Most of what we buy doesn't actually make us happier. It just makes us temporarily distracted from the fact that we're not living the life we actually want to live. The person who understands atomic money habits stops chasing the distraction and starts building the freedom to actually design their life. Let me talk about something that trips people up a lot, which is the difference between goals and systems. Most people set financial goals. I'm going to save $100,000. I'm going to pay off my debt. I'm going to have $1 million net worth. These are fine, but here's the problem with goals. They're destination focused. Once you hit them, what happens? You've achieved the goal, and suddenly you don't have that motivation anymore. Or worse, you fall short and you feel like a failure. But systems are different. A system is the daily practice that naturally leads you toward the destination without the destination being the point. The goal might be to save $100,000, but the system is to automatically transfer $200 from each paycheck into investments. The goal is abstract. The system is concrete. And this is crucial because goals are temporary, but systems are forever. When your financial system is working properly, you don't need goals. You just need to maintain the system. You need to make sure the automatic transfers are happening. You need to make sure you're not taking on high interest debt. You need to make sure you're staying aware of your financial situation. That's it. The system does the heavy lifting. And once the system is in place, your future is basically determined. You're going to build wealth because the system builds wealth. It's not about your willpower or your motivation anymore. It's about having a system that works automatically. This is why some people who are supposedly less disciplined than others end up wealthier. They have better systems. They made one good decision maybe years ago to automate their savings, and now they're building wealth automatically. Someone else might have better intentions and better willpower, but if they haven't set up a proper system, they're still stuck doing manual financial decisions that never quite happen. Systems beat willpower every single time. Here's the identity angle again, because it's really important. You don't want to be the kind of person who has to force themselves to save money. That requires willpower you don't have. Instead, you want to become the kind of person for whom saving money is just what they do. It's not a struggle, it's an identity. This person, the one who prioritizes future security, the one who understands the power of small daily decisions, the one who has built systems that work automatically, this person is going to build wealth almost effortlessly. You become this person not through some massive transformation, but through making atomic decisions that prove to yourself that this is who you are, you save $5 today, and you've proven you're someone who values future security. You do it again tomorrow, and you've reinforced that identity. You do it 1,000 times, and suddenly you're not trying to be someone who saves money. You are that person. And when you're that person, all the financial behaviors that lead to wealth building feel natural. One more thing that's worth understanding is the dark side of this principle. Everything we've talked about applies to negative habits just as much as positive ones. If you spend an extra $5 every day on things you don't need, you're not just spending $3,500 a year, you're also preventing the compounding of that money. Over 30 years, those $5 a day could have become $200,000. Instead, you got a series of impulse purchases and coffee runs that you probably don't even remember. Small negative habits compound just as powerfully as small positive ones. The difference is that negative compounding destroys wealth, while positive compounding builds it. This is why being aware of your small daily habits is so important. You're not just making tiny decisions, you're determining your entire financial trajectory with those decisions.